I've never used an Airbnb alone again after that. Even now, every time I stay in a hotel or homestay, the first thing I check is the ceiling. Sounds kind of insane, I know, but after what happened in that cabin, doesn't feel weird to me anymore. This happened near the end of 2021. I had just broken up with my girlfriend and decided to drive alone from Seattle down to Oregon for a few days to clear my head. I worked remotely, so all I really needed was my laptop and decent Wi-Fi. I found a pretty cheap Airbnb near the Cascade Forests. A wooden cabin, 2 floors, great reviews. Most people described it as peaceful and perfect for disconnecting from reality. Even now, that sentence still bothers me. The host's name was Daniel. He looked to be somewhere in his late 50s and seemed completely normal over messages. But one thing that felt a little strange was how much Daniel insisted I check in before 8 p.m. He even messaged me, "After 8, it gets very dark out here. You won't enjoy driving through the forest." At the time, I figured he just meant the roads were bad. I arrived around 7 p.m., and honestly, the cabin looked even better than the photos. It sat completely isolated in the middle of a pine forest, about 10 minutes off the main road. No nearby houses, nothing except trees. It was already getting dark outside. The wind moving through the forest sounded like distant whispering. The cabin had 2 floors, but the upper level was small, more like an attic converted into a bedroom. Inside was very clean. It smelled like old wood, but in a comforting way. Daniel had left the key under a flower pot, exactly where he said he would. The moment I stepped inside, though, I noticed something strange. There was a sound above the ceiling. Very faint. Knock, knock, like someone had just taken a single step in the attic. I stood there listening for a few seconds. Nothing else. I laughed to myself, assuming it was just the cabin settling from the cold. Old wooden houses make random noises all the time at night. I unpacked my stuff, opened my laptop to do some work, then ordered food from a nearby town. Around a little after 9 p.m., I was sitting in the kitchen when I heard the sound again. This time it was clearer. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks, directly above my head. I looked up at the ceiling. Silence. Then came a dragging noise. Scrape, like someone slowly dragging their foot across wooden boards. That's when I started feeling genuinely uncomfortable. I grabbed my phone, turned on a flashlight, and went upstairs to check. The staircase leading to the attic bedroom was narrow. The bedroom sat directly beneath the slanted roof. There was only a bed, a wooden wardrobe, and a window overlooking the forest. Nobody was there, but just as I was about to head back downstairs, I noticed a small hatch on the ceiling near the back of the room. An attic storage door. I don't know why, but the second I saw it, I felt cold all over. It wasn't in the Airbnb photos. And the strange thing was, it was slightly open. I was certain it hadn't been open when I first came upstairs. I stood there staring at it for a few seconds. Then a sound came from above it. Very faint. Knock. Directly above the attic hatch. The blood in my body practically turned to ice. I remember exactly what that felt like. Not fear of ghosts. More like the instinctive terror of realizing there might actually be someone else inside the house with you. I immediately called Daniel. He answered surprisingly fast. I asked, "Hey, is someone staying up in the attic or something?" There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Daniel laughed softly. "No, probably just squirrels." I said, "That sounded more like a person." Daniel went quiet again, longer this time. Then he simply said, "Don't open the attic door." I asked, "Why?" Daniel's voice dropped lower. "Trust me." Then he hung up. I remember standing in the middle of that room for almost a full minute, staring at the slightly open attic hatch. Then from above, I heard footsteps again. Knock, knock, knock. Only this time, they started moving. I barely slept that night. Around a little after 10 p.m., the footsteps above the attic became much clearer. It no longer sounded like maybe an animal. The footsteps were too heavy, too steady. It sounded exactly like someone pacing back and forth directly above my head. Knock, knock, knock. Then stopping. A few seconds of silence. Then starting again. The thing that disturbed me most was, every time the footsteps stopped, I had the overwhelming feeling that someone was standing directly above me, listening. I remember turning the TV volume up as loud as possible, just so I wouldn't have to hear the noises anymore. But close to midnight, the TV shut off by itself. The entire cabin dropped into complete silence. Then I heard dragging sounds directly above the ceiling. Scrape, scrape, like someone crawling. That's when I started genuinely panicking. I grabbed my phone and texted Daniel again. No response. I called him. No answer. At that point, I seriously considered grabbing my stuff and leaving immediately, but outside it was pouring rain. The cabin was deep in the woods and cell signal was barely working. I kept trying to calm myself down. Maybe it's just a homeless person hiding in the attic. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Around 1 a.m., I decided to lock the bedroom door and try to sleep. And that's when I heard knocking. Knock, 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 directly above the attic hatch. I practically stopped breathing. Then a few seconds later, something lightly scratched against the wood. Creak, creak, like fingernails dragging very slowly across the inside of the hatch. I remember my hand shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. Then, the attic hatch slowly began opening wider. Very slowly, a black gap spread across the ceiling above me. I don't know why I didn't run immediately. Maybe because my brain had almost completely frozen by then. I just lay there staring at the dark opening as it slowly widened inch by inch. Then something moved inside the darkness. Very fast. Too fast to clearly see, but I know for a fact I saw ahead. I jumped up instantly, bolted out of bed, and ran downstairs. The footsteps above the attic suddenly became faster. Bang, 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 like someone crawling unbelievably fast across the ceiling. I almost slipped and fell running down the staircase. Then every light in the cabin suddenly shut off at the same time. The entire place dropped into complete darkness. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, too terrified to even breathe loudly. Then, from upstairs, I heard something slowly beginning to walk down the staircase. Knock, 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 very slow, like it wanted me to hear every step. I remember exactly how that felt. My entire body went ice cold. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. The cabin was completely dark. The only light came from the faint glow of rain outside the windows. The footsteps on the staircase kept getting closer. Knock, knock, knock. Not fast, not rushed. Like whatever it was already knew I had nowhere left to go. I reached around for my phone. The flashlight flicked on. The beam shook violently with my trembling hand. And the second I pointed it at the staircase, the footsteps stopped. Nobody was there. The stairs were completely empty. But I knew for a fact something had just been standing there. I swear I could still hear breathing, very faint, right above the top of the staircase. Then suddenly, something slammed in the kitchen. Bang! I spun around instantly. One of the chairs had fallen onto the floor by itself. No wind. Nobody touched it. Then every cabinet door in the kitchen began opening at the same time. Clack, clack, clack. Wood crashing against wood echoed through the cabin. I was practically losing my mind at that point. I ran for the front door, but it wouldn't open. Locked solid. I remember actually screaming, slamming my body against it, pulling wildly at the handle. But it didn't move at all. Then behind me, I heard laughing. Very soft. A woman's voice. I turned around. Nobody there, but on the staircase, wet footprints were appearing, one by one, like something invisible was slowly walking downstairs. Knock. A fresh footprint appeared. Knock. Another one. I remember the blood in my body turning to ice. Because those footprints weren't human. They were too long. The toes looked stretched and twisted out of shape. Then my phone vibrated. Daniel was calling back. I answered immediately. There's someone in this house. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Daniel asked one thing. Did you open the attic hatch? I told him no. I heard him quietly exhale in relief. But right then, from upstairs came the sound of the attic hatch flying open. Bang! Then came crawling noises. Not footsteps. The sound of hands and feet scraping violently across wood. SCRRRT, SCRRRT, SCRRRT. Something was rushing downstairs. Daniel practically screamed through the phone. Don't look at it. Every light in the cabin suddenly came back on at once. And I saw it. An unbelievably thin woman crawling in the middle of the staircase. Her arms and legs were far too long. Wet hair hanging over her face. Her body bent in ways no human body should bend. The worst part was, she wasn't crawling like a normal person. She was moving on her back and arms, like all of her bones had been snapped backward. I almost stopped breathing. Then her head slowly lifted. The wet hair parted to the sides, and I saw her face. No eyes. No nose. Just a massive mouth stretched impossibly wide. Then she smiled. A raspy sound echoed through the entire cabin. I don't even remember how I got outside. The next thing I knew, I was sitting inside my car in the pouring rain, nearly 2 miles away from the cabin. The doors locked. My phone still connected to Daniel's call. His voice was very quiet. I told you not to open the attic hatch. I asked him what the hell that thing was. Daniel stayed silent for a long time. Then he said, "The guest before you." I heard him swallow hard. Disappeared inside that cabin. I never went back there again. But about 3 months later, Airbnb emailed me asking me to review my stay. And the thing that sent chills through my entire body was the listing was still active. People were still checking in every week. There were still new reviews. The most recent review only said one sentence. At night, don't look up at the attic hatch. Part 2. The woman who never left the apartment. I used to think the worst thing about renting an Airbnb was hidden cameras. Until what happened to me in Chicago. This story has nothing to do with forests or isolated cabins. It happened in a completely ordinary apartment right in the middle of downtown. And honestly, I think that's what made it so much scarier. This happened around mid-2022. At the time, I was working freelance as a video editor, so I traveled between states pretty often to meet clients. I rented an Airbnb in Chicago for 3 weeks because I had a long-term project nearby. The apartment was on the 11th floor of an older building called Ashbury Heights. Not a luxury apartment complex, but clean, quiet, almost entirely 5-star reviews. The host's name was Rebecca. She looked to be somewhere in her 40s and was very polite over messages. She even texted me, "If you hear people walking in the hallway at night, don't worry. The walls in this building are very thin." At the time, I actually thought it was funny, like she was warning me ahead of time to avoid complaints. I checked in around 6 p.m. The apartment was small but nice. A living room, a small kitchen, and a bedroom overlooking the city streets below. The first thing I noticed was there were mirrors everywhere. Way too many mirrors. A mirror in the hallway. A mirror facing the couch. A mirror in the kitchen. There was even a tall mirror beside the bedroom door that almost reached the ceiling. I remember actually saying to myself, who the hell designed this place? But besides that, everything felt completely normal. Until the first night. A little after 2 a.m., I woke up because I heard noises in the hallway. At first I assumed it was just another resident walking around. But then I realized the footsteps weren't moving. Knock, knock, knock. The sound kept repeating in the exact same rhythm. Very slow, like someone was standing directly outside my apartment door, lifting one foot and dropping it over and over again. I lay there listening for almost a full minute. Then the sound stopped. Complete silence. I was just about to fall back asleep when someone knocked on the door. Knock, knock, knock. 3 soft knocks. Right outside. I remember checking my phone. 2:13 a.m. I don't know why I still remember that exact time, so clearly even now. I didn't open the door. Didn't say anything either. A few seconds later, I heard a woman laughing softly out in the hallway. Then everything went silent again. The next morning, I asked the building receptionist if anyone lived on that floor. The old security guard, Martin, stared at me for a long moment before asking, "You're staying in 1108?" I said yes. Martin went quiet for a few seconds. Then he simply said, "If somebody knocks on your door at night, don't open it." I remember getting chills instantly. because he said it almost exactly the same way Daniel had at the cabin. I asked, "Why?" Martin shook his head. "Just don't." Then he walked away. That night, I started feeling genuinely uneasy. I even considered changing Airbnbs. But work was overwhelming, so I ended up staying a few more days. And that turned out to be the dumbest decision I've ever made. Around the third night, I started seeing the woman in the mirrors. The first time I saw her was in the hallway mirror. It was around 1 a.m. I had just gotten water from the kitchen and was walking back when I accidentally glanced into the mirror. And I saw someone standing behind me. A woman, long hair, wearing an old white dress, standing at the far end of the hallway leading to the bedroom. I spun around immediately. Nobody there. The hallway was completely empty. I remember my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I just stood there frozen for a few seconds, trying to calm myself down. You're just sleep deprived. But the moment I looked back at the mirror, the woman was no longer standing at the end of the hallway. She was closer, much closer, only a few steps behind me. I have never felt terror like that in my life. I practically threw myself into the bedroom and slammed the door shut. That night, I left every light in the apartment on. I couldn't sleep, and close to 2 a.m., the knocking started again. Knock, knock, knock. This time it was louder, clearer. I remember standing frozen in the middle of the living room, too scared to even breathe loudly. Then my phone vibrated. A message from a host, "Rebecca, don't open the door for her." The blood in my body instantly turned cold. I immediately called Rebecca. No answer. I kept texting. "Who is she?" No reply. The knocking outside the apartment continued. Knock, knock, knock. Then, the doorknob slowly began turning. Creak, creak. I swear my mind almost shut down at that moment, because the apartment door was locked from the inside, but the handle was still turning, like someone was genuinely trying to get in. Then I heard a woman's voice outside in the hallway. Very soft. "Open the door for me." I remember there was something deeply wrong with that voice. It had no emotion, no anger, no desperation, just empty, like something trying to imitate the way humans talk. I slowly backed toward the bedroom, and right then, every light in the apartment suddenly went out at the same time. Darkness swallowed the entire place. Then footsteps echoed from inside the living room. Knock, knock, knock. No longer outside in the hallway. Now, they were inside the apartment. I remember exactly how that felt. My entire body locked up. I was standing in the pitch-black bedroom, staring out into the darkness of the living room while the footsteps kept getting closer. Knock, knock, knock. Very slow, like whatever it was knew I was listening. I reached for my phone and turned the flashlight back on. The beam shook violently in my trembling hand, and the second the light swept across the living room, everything was completely empty. Nobody there, but the footsteps were still happening. Knock, knock, knock. Now, sounding like they were right beside my ear. Then the mirror next to the bedroom door started shaking slightly. Creak, creak. I turned toward it, and I saw her, standing inside the mirror, not a reflection behind me. She was literally standing inside the glass itself. The woman in the white dress, wet hair covering her face, her head tilted unnaturally to one side. And the most horrifying part was, she was slowly walking closer to the surface of the mirror from inside. I could barely breathe. Then came knocking, not from the apartment door, from the mirror itself. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks, directly in front of me. I stumbled backward so hard I dropped my phone. The flashlight beam spun wildly across the ceiling, and for one split second, I saw someone crawling across the living room ceiling, extremely fast, arms and legs far too long, moving in a way no human possibly could. I grabbed my phone and bolted straight for the front door. This time the door opened. I practically ran down 11 flights of stairs because the elevator took too long. When I reached the lobby, Martin was still there. The second he saw my face, all the color drained from his. He only asked one thing. "You saw her, didn't you?" I practically screamed. What the hell is on the 11th floor? Martin stayed quiet for a very long time. Then he pulled me into the security office. He told me apartment 1108 used to belong to a woman named Evelyn who lived alone. Around 2018, neighbors started hearing her talking to someone inside the apartment every night. But whenever management checked, Evelyn was always alone. Then one night, the hallway security camera captured her standing outside her apartment door for hours. Not moving, just staring into the peephole like she was talking to someone inside. The next morning, they found her dead in the bedroom. But the strangest part was, every mirror in the apartment had been shattered from the inside. After that night, I left the Airbnb immediately. I never went back to Ashbury Heights again. But about 2 weeks later, Rebecca sent me one final message. Just one sentence. The night you left, the hallway camera on the 11th floor never recorded you leaving the apartment. I asked her what she meant. Rebecca didn't reply for almost an hour. And the message she finally sent is the reason I still can't look into mirrors for too long at night. The camera only recorded a woman in a white dress walking out. Series, True Horror Stories about Airbnb. Part 3, The Room That Wasn't in the Booking. I used to work remote tech support for a software company for almost 2 years. The job was pretty boring, but the pay was decent. And since I worked remotely, I spent a lot of time renting Airbnbs in different states for a few weeks at a time before moving somewhere else. After what happened at the apartment in Chicago, I avoided Airbnb completely for a long while. But then my company asked me to fly to Atlanta for a major project that was supposed to last almost a month. Hotels were insanely expensive at the time, so eventually I went back to Airbnb again. And that turned out to be the biggest mistake I've ever made. The townhouse I rented was in the suburbs outside Atlanta. A pretty nice 3-story townhouse in the photos. The host name was Julia, early 30s, responded to messages incredibly fast, and had over 200 positive reviews. There were no red flags at all, at least not at first. Julia even sent a friendly message saying, "The basement downstairs isn't being used, so just keep that door locked." At the time, I didn't think much of it. Lots of houses in the US haven't used basements. I checked in around 8 p.m. The townhouse looked exactly like the photos. Clean, quiet. The smell of scented candles still lingered in the air, like someone had cleaned the place not long before I arrived. The first floor had the living room and kitchen. The second floor had 2 bedrooms. And downstairs, there was a narrow wooden staircase leading to the basement. The moment I walked into the house, I noticed the basement door. White paint, a lock on the outside. The thing that made me uncomfortable was there were fresh scratches on the doorknob, like someone had been clawing at it from the inside. I remember laughing nervously to myself, thinking I was just paranoid after everything that happened before. The first night was completely normal. I worked until almost 1 a.m. before heading upstairs to sleep. A little after 2 a.m., I woke up because of a sound. Very faint. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks. It sounded like it was coming from downstairs. I stayed still for a few seconds. Then I heard it again, this time clearer. Knock, 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 like someone knocking from the inside of the basement door. I remember my whole body instantly going cold, because I was absolutely certain I was alone in the house. I grabbed my phone and opened the security camera app connected to the front doorbell. Nobody outside, no movement in the living room. But right then, the knocking came again, louder. Bang, bang, bang. Then came a faint scraping sound. Creak, like fingernails dragging slowly across wood. I barely slept after that. The next morning I texted Julia. "Does anyone ever go into the basement?" Julia replied almost immediately. "No, the basement is locked." I told her about the knocking noises. Julia went silent for almost 10 minutes before replying. "It's an old house. It makes noises sometimes." But something about the way she answered felt wrong, like she was trying to end the conversation as quickly as possible. Around the 3rd night, things started getting worse. That night, I was working in the living room when the electricity flickered. Every light in the house blinked twice, then came back on. And in the exact second the room went dark, I swear I saw someone standing at the bottom of the basement stairs. A very tall figure, head hanging low, standing completely motionless in the darkness below. When the lights came back, nobody was there. I remember freezing for a few seconds afterward, then telling myself my eyes were just playing tricks on me. But close to 2 a.m., the noises from the basement started again. This time it wasn't knocking anymore. It was footsteps. Knock, knock, knock. Very slow, like someone pacing around beneath the basement floor. I still remember exactly how that felt. The entire house was so quiet that every footstep echoed clearly through the wooden floorboards. Then suddenly, everything stopped. A few seconds later, I heard a voice. Very faint. Sounded like a woman. I couldn't make out the words. Just constant whispering, like someone talking to themselves down in the basement. That's when I started genuinely panicking. I pulled out my phone and started recording video in case I needed proof to send Julia later. In a second, I stepped closer to the basement door. The whispering stopped completely. Total silence. I stood directly in front of that white door, my heart pounding so hard my chest hurt. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Julia. I still don't understand how it came at that exact moment. Don't go into the basement. The blood in my body instantly turned cold. I texted back immediately. There's someone down there, isn't there? No response. I called her. Julia didn't answer. Then from the other side of the basement door came knocking. Knock, 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 right against the wood. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Then a woman's voice came from inside the basement. Very soft, very raspy. Julia. I remember every hair on my arms standing up instantly. Because that voice didn't sound like someone calling for help. It sounded like something trying to imitate human speech. Then the voice came again, this time closer, right on the other side of the door. Julia, open the door. I stumbled backward, and right then, the basement doorknob slowly began turning by itself. Very slowly. Creak, creak. I swear my brain almost shut down at that moment. Because the basement door was locked from the outside, but the handle was still turning like someone was genuinely trying to come out. I practically sprinted upstairs the moment the basement doorknob started turning harder. The sound of metal rattling echoed from downstairs. Creak, creak, creak. Then the pounding started. Bang, bang, bang. The entire townhouse trembled slightly with every hit. I locked the bedroom door and stood frozen in the middle of the room. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear in my ears. Then, everything suddenly stopped. No more pounding. No more footsteps. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner. I remember thinking, maybe somebody really is trapped down there. And somehow, that thought felt even worse. I pulled out my phone to call the local police. But right before I hit dial, my phone vibrated. Julia was calling. I answered immediately. There's someone in the basement. The other end stayed silent for a few seconds. Then Julia spoke in a very quiet voice. I locked it down there. I asked, what? Julia started crying. She said the townhouse used to belong to her mother. Around 2019, her mother began hearing voices coming from the basement every night. At first, she assumed homeless people had broken in. But then she started seeing a woman standing at the bottom of the basement stairs every time she opened the door. The woman always stayed in the darkness, never fully stepped into the light. Julia said her mother slowly started changing after that, talking to herself, sitting for hours in front of the basement door like she was listening to someone whispering from below. Then one night, her mother disappeared. The police never found a body. Never found any sign that she left the house. The only thing they found was the basement door standing wide open. I practically shouted, "What the hell is down there?" Julia didn't answer immediately. Then she said something that still haunts me to this day. I think it doesn't like being alone. Right then, I heard footsteps in the upstairs hallway. Knock, knock, knock. Very slow, very heavy. The blood in my body instantly turned cold. Because I was already on the second floor, and I knew for a fact nobody else was supposed to be in the house. The footsteps stopped directly outside the bedroom door. A few seconds of silence. Then I heard a woman laughing softly right outside. I don't even remember how I reacted after that. I only remember climbing out the bedroom window, crawling onto the roof, then jumping into the backyard. I left everything behind. My laptop, my suitcase, everything. I drove straight to the nearest hotel, almost 20 minutes away. The next morning, the police returned to the townhouse with me. The basement was completely empty. Nobody there. No evidence of anything. But the thing that sent chills through my entire body was the outside lock on the basement door had been bent outward from the inside. Julie had deleted the Airbnb listing the following week. At least I thought she did. Until about 4 months later, when I randomly found the same townhouse listed on Airbnb again. New photos, new host name, new reviews, and the most recent review only said one sentence. At night, don't answer if someone calls your name from the basement.